Welcome back into Content is for Closers. We have a very special episode for you once again. But before we get to it, Carlton, how's it going? What'd you think of this episode with Justin Gordon?
It's great, man. I just need to up my swag for to compete with you. You just got the hat and the hoodie on. I just need to get a little bit
I'm
fancier
just
with my
learning from
dress.
all of our great guests.
Yeah, there you
We've
go.
had some killer guests on recently, and yeah, they're helping me. They're helping me up my game. I had we just recorded yesterday, so it'll be out a little bit with Landon Campbell from Twist This Week in Startups.
Hmm.
And I was telling him my trade for him being on the show as a regular contributor is he needs to keep me from becoming an old, and he agreed to that. So
I'll just give you style tips.
yeah,
Just
for
yeah,
sure.
that's
Yes,
that's where it's coming from. Yeah, it was good, man. I love the episode because there's some things in the content space where you think, well, is this a fluke or is this somebody that just got lucky? But this is a case where he was doing it, practicing it, refining his craft for a long time. And I think it's one of those cases where it wasn't necessarily if he would become successful, but when he would become successful, because he literally was just publishing and pumping out content for a long time, and not just in small batches here and there. He was doing a volume of content, and so I think that's one big takeaway: is if you want to be successful with content creation, you can't just do it once a month or once every quarter or so. You have to be pushing and really looking for ways to get out there.
yeah, and in hindsight, what you said is true, right? Like in hindsight, it was just a matter of time until he was successful, but Justin didn't know that, or a lot of us
Yeah.
don't know that as we're in the trenches. And so I think that's what's so helpful with a lot of what he said during this episode and a lot of the content that he creates now, which is essentially the behaviors to do on a consistent basis in order to get an outcome that you'd want down the road. That's what I took away from it. The things that he shared, the tools that he uses are not like trend or fad based. They're just consistent behaviors that will help you get to an objective that you want to on the other side of it. So really enjoyed this conversation. Let's get into it with Justin Gordon from Vitalize VC. Today's guest is Justin Gordon, who is the Director of Marketing at Vitalize Venture Capital, host of the Vitalize podcast, and the host of the Just Go Grind podcast, along with a bunch more. Justin's entire career has been built on the back of creating and distributing smart and helpful content in a variety of industries. And during this interview, he really gets into how content took him from making $30,000 as a gym trainer to leading marketing for startups and now being the face of a venture capital firm. He also shared how he's creating what he calls a serendipity engine through his content and the advice that he gives to people just starting out, along with a bunch more trends that he's really excited about and a bunch of other stuff we got into. I was really inspired by Justin's energy and consistency, and I think you will be too. Let's dive into this episode with Justin Gordon from Vitalize VC. All right, we've got Justin Gordon here on the show. Justin, normally I give this, Justin Gordon from, and I can give all these different things. You have so many different places that I could pin you to, different brands that you work on. So maybe it'd be better if you just give us a description of what you do and what you're working on.
Yeah, Adam, I appreciate that. There's a lot going on the Vitalize side. I'm the director of marketing at Vitalize Venture Capital. We're a venture capital fund as well as angel community, as well as an SPV network. So all things investing into startups from pre-seed to seed. I write our newsletter. We host a podcast with a couple episodes a week. We're very, very heavily involved on Twitter, a huge part of our content strategy there. I also host my own podcast called Just Go Grind, write my own newsletter called Justin's Journal. I had one called Startup Hiring, which kind of let go a little bit. And then I'm also building a course through Maven as well on podcasting
I saw that.
on top of all the other things. So there's a lot of content things going on, Adam.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for making time for us. And kind of like I told you before we kick off, normally I'm hesitant to say, hey, tell us how you got here or tell us your backstory. But your story leans so directly into what this show is about. I'd love it if you could just give us a little bit of the background and specifically what were you doing before you started this content creation journey, and then kind of how did that parlay into what all those things you just listed that you're working on now?
Yeah, it's been quite the quite the journey, as you mentioned. So back in 2013 was when I actually started blogging, and the reason for that is I had my own personal training business. I started blogging to really as at an internship called Fitness Quest 10 was the place. It was a place where NFL athletes were training alongside of everyday folks. I thought it was really interesting. I started blogging about it, and so that was my first foray into let's start writing because the person there, Todd Durkin, who was the founder of that, he was big into writing, had this huge business built up of all content. And so I had never really done content before that. I used that to grow Just Go Fitness, was my fitness company at the time.
Mm.
And I saw how content led to me getting clients, growing my expertise, even though I was very new to the industry. I saw that as a way to elevate myself. So I started blogging. I eventually did a challenge. I think it was like 400 posts in 400 days. I ended up doing a couple hundred blog posts. But from that progression, then that kept getting me clients for training, elevating my brand personally because people started seeing my articles, learn more about SEO at that point in time. So people were coming to my site. I was getting 5 or 6 thousand views, every month. And so that
Wow.
slowly grew. I could saw the connection between content, brand, marketing, how all that fueled a business. And then from that, I joined an e-commerce company and doing the same type of thing. So it was like we had e-commerce, sports figures and bobbleheads called Clark Toys. We used content to one with the ads as well we were doing. But once we did some content things, primarily video to showcase these figures was really interesting because people hadn't seen them before in that way. So after a year, I finally convinced my my cousin. I was like, hey, we should do videos because these figures are cool, they're exclusive, and you know so much about it. So leveraging the stakeholder that is the owner of the business to get him to talk, which he wasn't normally on camera, wasn't comfortable at first, but getting him to talk, I saw how that content exploded. So we had vendors and everyone always talking about it. We went to conferences. People are like, I saw your guys' videos. They look amazing. Like I can see that. Can we give you some of the figures we have to showcase on video? And so I saw that progression from there. And then I went to business school at USC. Then after that was still the whole time creating podcasts. So in 2018, right before business school, I decided to create a podcast called Just Go Grind because I knew I was going to talk to all these different people and I wanted a way to reach out. So even in school, so every single day we had guest speakers come in. I'd be like, hey, I have a podcast. Do you want to come on? And so while no one else in my class had a reason to follow up these people because they're like CEOs and executives, they would talk to me because I had a show, which is super small at the time too. And it was like, this is insane. Like, this is amazing that
Yeah.
they can do this. And so that progressed to another company after business school in the paid acquisition kind of space. Wasn't doing as much content there. Content was a part of it. So I ended up leaving there. I was doing podcasts full time for about 5 or 6 months. I was doing every day starting in August of 2020. That led me to meeting Gail at Vitalize through a cold DM on Twitter. I had been interviewing people, saw what she was doing, thought it was really interesting. And I was like, I reached out. And then a week after our episode went live, she posted this position. I like retweeted it to my network because I thought it was cool. And then after that, I was talking to my friend in a walk. And I'm like, this actually is something I should do. And I wasn't going to because I was doing my own thing full time. But
Sure.
I found the company so intriguing. And so the content led me to Gale, which got me into venture capital. And we've done a lot in the last year plus since I joined.
Wow, that is a fire hydrant of content in the best way. So many follow ups on that. So first of all, you said you started in the fitness space, and that a little bit explains. I think we're doing this. We're mutually in this 1,000 mile thing for 2022, and you're very fast. You're frustratingly fast. I've noticed from that group. But so that's kind of what you started on, and that was your business. Was that all self-taught, the kind of the SEO and how that all connects? Like, did you just sort of figure that out, or was that from school or something like that?
Yes, I don't have a marketing background at all. So I had an exercise sports science degree undergrad. And so very much so on the fitness side of it. What I was very lucky with early on is finding books. So I'm from Wisconsin. I went to school in Wisconsin, finding books on entrepreneurship that got me interested in it in the first place. And then just reading blog after blog. I even started listening to podcasts even back then.
Mhm.
It's like an I Love Marketing. I think podcast is one of the early ones, but a lot of different podcasts and content. So I was just hungry to learn more about it. And I think one of the common threads, though, even going back to 2013 or so, when I started blogging, was this idea of testing. And so I was just always testing different things out. I continue today to do the exact same thing. I'm very lucky that I have a lot of autonomy, which is fortunate because if I was in these rails, I would be very unhappy. But that thread from that was testing different things from that. So I would just learn things from books and blogs primarily. So blogging was much bigger even back then. So I'd learn from there, I'd test things. And so even when I was writing for my own site, I remember, trying to write some articles, not getting that much traction. I see some get some traction, and then I copied the same formula. So one of the things was I saw that I was writing about celebrity workouts, and I was like, wait a minute, like this is like going crazy. I just generally I'm curious about some of the extreme ones. So like 300, the movie, the guys were so ripped. They had like the most ripped. What I did was I literally would just look at like every article on the topic, aggregate all that into a cohesive blog post, and then write that. And that got the most traction, like those types of blog posts. And I saw that. So I just repeated over and over again. I did that for that one. I did one for like maybe Hugh Jackman or something. And I did another one. And I kept seeing that traction from that. So I pulled in that thread, experimenting over and over again. And that's really how I learned all things content. It's always been experimentation.
I love that. And then fast forwarding to even now with Vitalize, you talk about you met Gail, that you kind of became interested. Venture so different than where you started. And I think what's beautiful about that whole story is there's all these different threads. And I've heard you talk about this before, that kind of fold into, I think you call it a serendipity engine. So I'm curious. Yep. It's a great moniker. Great. You're obviously a very natural marketer. What is that? What is that? And like what does that mean to someone who's out listening and thinking about how to use market or content that way?
Yeah, I think when you look at content, you're never sure what's going to hit and what's going to reach who. We as marketers, we have an idea of who we would want to reach, our outcomes and those sort of things, but you never really know which piece it's going to be. And I don't actually think you have to have the attributes for everything. Like, we like to try to attribute this post led to this person. It's never that clear. Attribution is insane, right? It's so hard to measure. And even when I was in at Clark Toys with doing e-commerce, like so hard to track that. Was it the newsletter? Yeah, they clicked through at their newsletter, but was it the social media post first? Like that part is so challenging in that. And so I mean, to that point, it's like all that in terms of the attribution and in terms of everything with that, it was just like, I don't know. It's hard to even say. I'm losing my train of thought on this with exactly what it was. But I think with Vitalize and everything we're doing, yeah, what was it? Sorry, one more time on the question.
Oh, just what the idea of a serendipity engine is, and how you
yeah, and there's a few things with it, but with the main thing around having this is like you put out all these different pieces of content and you never know which one's going to hit. And so my whole thing has always been to put out a wide variety. And so every podcast episode, for instance, they have an evergreen like shelf life, because I do interviews with people as their stories. It's not like it's going to change. And so because we have this evergreen content, all these different things you put out there allow for someone to find you in a fun, interesting way. So I'll have people ping me randomly like, I saw your newsletter, or I saw your tweet, or I saw your LinkedIn post, or I saw your YouTube video. And that's why even like we were doing this video, like I put them on YouTube, even though I don't get a ton of views, like you still find people through that. And also it's a search engine that, can grow from that. Absolutely. So I think the whole idea of having this serendipity engine is that you put out a lot of different things that give you at bats or lottery tickets, just like we do for startup investing. Really, when you're putting all these bets, and obviously you're trying to be educated around that, but as you're testing things, good things happen from that. And so going back to like the podcasting side of it, I had equity in a startup that found me because I had interviewed the founder. And then he was like, hey, I want to have you join my company. That happened. Obviously with Gail, finding her serendipitously through just posting on Twitter and being on that platform. And even, I mean, so many other things. I met so many founders and VCs through the podcast, and then people reach out to you. So now I'm at the point where, people reach out cold to me, PR people constantly do. And like, it's insane what can happen when you start putting those things out there, and then good things just happen. But you have to be willing to, look stupid in some ways and not really know what you're doing. But then over time, good things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. It's how I became connected with you. You did a podcast. Well, somehow you got connected. We're talking to either Ruben or Chacho Valadez. I know you just did the episode with Chacho recently. He's a friend of ours. We produced his show. So there's just all these different. I kept seeing this guy, Justin Gordon, and then actually going into your story and saying like, oh, he built this whole career. So just piece by piece with content. It's super interesting, and I totally can resonate with when we started our business about 5 years ago. We started a podcast and got conversations with people who we had no business talking to. And because we had microphones, essentially, so it's just crazy. But if you were starting over today and you're back at the gym and you're, what would it look like? Just kind of like riffing, like what would be the steps that you take or the tactics you use for somebody who doesn't have the last, whatever it is, 5, 7, 10 years of creation under their belt?
Yeah, I mean, it's all a matter of, first of all, what your goals are and who you're trying to reach. I mean, I think that's kind of the first thing. If I was going back to, obviously, fitness is a little bit different. If I look at the platforms of a combination of rented and owned audiences, right? So like I look at now what my strategy would have been for day one, if it was venture capital, for instance, would have been tweet way more, have an ongoing newsletter, capture emails. Like very, 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 very simple. Like don't complicate it. However, if your people aren't on Twitter, your audience isn't on Twitter, if it's Facebook or if it's Instagram, whatever, same type of thing. Like drive them back to a website where you can gather emails, and then you have that owned audience versus that rented audience. And so that's something I never really understood early on. Like had I been building an email list since like 2013 when I started, and that would have grown a lot faster. I ended up starting one in fitness a little bit later. It wasn't huge at all. And even in this kind of venture space, I've had one nonchalantly for a bit, but only now am I trying to do a little bit more on the newsletter side of it. So I think anyone starting off with, if you do that and don't necessarily marry yourself to one specific topic or theme, I mean, I think at the start, it's helpful to kind of get your footing on something, but eventually like people are going to follow you for you. I think, yes, you have a certain audience, a certain topic for sure, but then as you can branch out from that over time, because like even now, I mean, the connection of fitness and all the different things I'm doing is me at the end. And so people are kind of curious from that. And I think one of the things I've always kind of thought about in terms of people starting out with, and what resonates with me was from Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Work Week. One of the things that he mentioned around like being a master of none, a master of one basically, or jack of all trades. And I love that he understood that it's more fun to be a jack of all trades. And even though in the short term, you might have a little bit less traction, I think it's interesting when you create content in that way, because you figure out the things you're interested in, things you're good at, things that people like you for, and it's just way more fun to have kind of multiple, not personalities, but multiple, irons in the fire per se. Like I talk about the fitness stuff on Twitter. Some people might say super niche, but I get to meet like you or like go deeper with Ruben because of that. And like, to me, that's just more fun. And long-term, I'm going to keep doing it more because I enjoy it. Whereas if I had gone niche on one thing, I thought about that even on Launch Just Go Grind, the podcast, I was thinking about doing like a really specific career at the time. I was like career 24/7 is like one option, like super career focused, in some niche. And I was like, well, that's not going to be as fun. I want more broad appeal just so I can change later on. So I may just go grind. And that's why my newsletter is like Justin's Journal, because I don't want to go super niche necessarily. But for someone just going to start off, like I said, rented audiences versus owned audience, understand that and capture emails is like the core of everything.
Yeah. And it's having that marathon mindset, right? Because you're in it, you're in it for just inevitable or whatever that word is. There's no cap.
Definitely.
I can't think of the words. But
indefinitely, we're both
definitely there it is. And so there's not necessarily like an urgency that you have to make it about this one thing. I'm totally with you. People who follow me on Twitter have to hear about the Philadelphia Eagles. They have to hear me moan about them, about fitness, about content, whatever. But they're along for the ride, or they choose to be there as a result. And so it kind of brings your whole person to it. And I love the way you think about that. What's something that's been your maybe either a favorite piece of content or interview, or the performance of something? Like you've made so many things at this point. What's one of your favorites that you've done over the last however many years?
Yeah. One of the things I always kind of come back to is impact and things that are impactful. One, just like in their mission inherently and what the actual outcome is. I interviewed the founder of the Against Malaria Foundation on the podcast. And the reason I did is because it was rated like one of the top charities every single year for like 5 or 6 or something years. And I was like, well, why and how? And if you go to their site, it's like super bare bones, like HTML basically, like super big, but they track everything to a T. So it has a number of like donations and the amount and where it goes, and they track every dollar and where it goes. And the way they got started is with like the founder basically doing a swim to try to get like 1 million people to swim. And he mentioned this idea of, I think it was like 10-minute thinking or something, where, how could you for just a few minutes, like a little action, have a massive impact? So he thought, if I just like call like 10 different people, whatever it was, like a minute each call, in theory, that have the biggest impact possible. And so hearing that in that podcast and how he thought about it and how he thinks about kind of leverage in that way, and then being so data driven to track everything to stand out so people can actually see like, okay, like this is the literally like the village where these nets were bought, where your money went to.
Mm.
And that level of transparency I thought was amazing. And that only came about because I think I heard about him when I was following like this 80,000 hours organization. And I heard about that charity. And because I have a podcast, I reached out and he literally said to me, I think like, I don't really do interviews normally, but you seem compelling and I want to talk. I was like, what?
So great.
And I talked to this guy who's created like one of the top charities in the world. And to me, like that has been one of the favorite pieces of content moments. I've had it on the show so far.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to link that below. Was that recently or?
It's a little while ago, probably episode in the hundreds. I'm at like 300 something now. It's probably in the hundreds, I think.
All right, we'll dig it out. But that's
Rob Mather, I believe is his name.
Rob Mather, awesome. What about on the tool set side? Is there anything that you feel like has been particularly helpful for you that you've just really become comfortable with? For me, my team hates it, but I'm just a Notion addict, and so they get sent Notion links whether they want it or not. Is there anything like that you're just comfortable with?
Well, first off, Adam, I'll say I have convinced my team that we are using Notion now. So I made us basically switch over as well. So I was like, I started hearing more about it and I'm like, all right, Notion is legit. We need to use this. I think we use it for like almost everything now. There's only a few things we're not using Notion for at Vitalize. And I think one more too, though, like Hype Fury, and if you've heard of that for Twitter, I find Hype Fury to be amazing. Shout out to Hype Fury. Yannick, I believe, is the founder. It just makes growing your Twitter audience a little bit easier. They can do like automatic retweets. They can help you schedule posts. They can help you draft threads if you want. I didn't really want to use software for Twitter other than Twitter itself. But I found this to help because it just increases your engagement and increases it without you doing really any extra lift. And for us, we already have such a lack of time in the venture world when you have founders pitching you all the time. You're trying to manage your current founders, obviously find new ones, do the content stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so anything that saves us time and makes it easier for us, that was a tool that we more recently have started using. So Gail uses it as well. And our team uses it. And I think that's one of the best content tools, at least in terms of Twitter, we found.
Oh, cool. I haven't. So is that something you can like, do you use it for your Twitter account or is it more for like corporate handles or whatever?
Yes and yes. All the above. Yeah. So I use it for my personal one, the Vitalize VC, as well as Gale Force VC, which is Gale's. We use it for all of those.
Very cool. All right. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Last question. What are you just excited about? What do you got going on in 22? Obviously a million things, but what's one that maybe just has you really amped or something new that you're excited to delve into throughout this year?
Yeah. The most recent thing, Adam, that I'm like geeking out on is Twitter Spaces. Now, I used Clubhouse a little bit back in the day. Like everyone kind of, I think, tried it out at one point.
Yeah.
Twitter Spaces, we went on my first one maybe last week, and then we hosted our first Twitter Spaces this week. And I think the reason being, and the reason why I'm so bullish on that in general, is more of a broader topic. So Twitter Spaces is part of a broader conversation around connection. So using content to connect. And that to me has been the greatest thing. So today, as we were speaking, February 3rd, I had this tweet that's going viral right now around like for angel investors identifying themselves on Twitter, basically like, hey, shouting out angel investors so early stage founders can get connected to them, because a lot of people, whether it be different markets or whatever, they just don't know investors. And like, I think as a VC, when you're in it, you take that for granted. Like, oh yeah, they know VCs, like whatever. But I had zero network in startups in VC before I started my podcast, like zero. I knew my cousin was a founder, maybe one other person in 2018. And so in like 3-ish years, maybe 3.5 years, like I have a massive network of so many people. So anytime I can use content, whether it be Twitter Spaces, Twitter specifically, to connect people, that's what I get excited about. So like in that post, for instance, I think there's dozens of people. I mean, even as we're talking right now, I know there's like, it's nonstop notifications. There's so many people connecting, VCs and angels connecting to founders in the thread. Like I find that to be amazing. The ability to use these platforms and to leverage content to connect other people and to connect with people. That is what I'm most excited about. I've always been excited about that, back in even the early days of writing a blog and then getting my first person to email me from Nebraska. I will not forget. They were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, back in 2013, to now when I can connect people online through my network. And as it grows, I just become more helpful. That to me is what I'm most excited about.
So cool. Okay, so just to geek out on it for just a second. So the thread is going viral, but how does that relate to the spaces? Was the space about that topic? Is that what you mean?
So it related because that gave me the idea to even write the thread. So in the
Oh,
Twitter spaces, what I was finding from Twitter spaces was that people were connecting, people were like trying to connect with VCs in Twitter spaces. They were trying to learn more. I'm like, hey, I don't have a network in VC or anything. And so I heard of that in the Twitter space. And you get these ideas from people who are on the ground, right? Like I talk to a lot of founders inherently through being at a venture firm. And so you hear some of that. But then when in the Twitter spaces, people being vulnerable in those and asking questions and engaging, that gave me ideas like, wait a minute, like I have at this point now like 4,000 or so like Twitter followers. I'm like, well, a lot of those are VCs or angel investors because we interview them on our show, interview them on my show. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to write this tweet around like angel investors, like identify yourselves. A lot of people at early stage, not even just in the US, like all over the place. We have a lot of people in the thread already in like Latin America and Africa, you know, they don't have networks in venture capital. And so if I can just tweet that and kind of facilitate that, then a lot of good will happen. And so that all started, the idea of it came from the Twitter spaces. And that's why I want to do more Twitter spaces, because I think they're a great way to kind of engage, but also get those ideas that then you can leverage to create the content. Just like doing user interviews or user research in that way, I think Twitter spaces are going to be great for that. And that's what I'm excited about too.
so cool. Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Thanks for spending the time with us. If people want to follow you with all the stuff that you've got going on, what's the easiest way for them to get hooked into the world of Justin?
Yeah. On Twitter is probably the easiest way. Justin Gordon 212 is my Twitter handle. That's because 212 degrees is the temperature it takes your water to boil. And with water boiling, you can power a steam engine. That was something I picked up from a book a long time ago. I add 212 to the end of my profile. I think about that every time I go on Twitter. So that is the easiest way for people to reach out to me is on Twitter.
Awesome. We'll do it. Well, we appreciate you again, and we'll be following everything you do and watching your runs with Envy as the year goes on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate it.